Hello everyone, my name is Candace Strickland and I am Dr. Duncan's graduate assistant. You might have saw me previously in the video she posted in your announcements. On behalf of Dr. Duncan, she just wanted me to create a quick video for you guys explaining some of the concepts and the topics that you guys shared that you were a little bit muddled and confused on during your last two tickets out the door that you guys completed for the class. So I just wanted to make a quick video kind of explaining those elements to you guys so that you can better understand them as you proceed and progress on through the program, so you kind of have an idea of what those terms mean, especially within the field of criminal justice. So the first concept that you guys expressed that you had a little bit of concern or you were a little bit confused about was the consensus view and the conflict view. So essentially, these two views were birthed through the notion of why some crimes are deemed as unlawful and while others are not deemed unlawful, and why are some criminalized by individuals in society or frowned upon and others are not. So they were these two views birthed out of that idea of that why certain crimes are considered to be criminal, why others are not. So essentially, the consensus view argues that there are two factors that deem whether a crime should be considered or a crime should be conceptualized as criminal or not. So the first is if it's harmful to the majority of people in society. So therefore, if it's harmful and it gets everyone in this kind of uneasy feeling, then it's going to be deemed as criminal by everyone. Secondly, if it's deemed unlawful by the law, so if it's criminalized by the actual statute or law that's in place, then that's what makes it deemed as criminal. So the key to understanding consensus view is to know that what makes a crime unlawful is because, one, the majority of people in society feel that it should be a crime, and two, that it's outlawed by the current existing law. So these two elements kind of work together to make a certain act be deemed criminal or uncriminal based on the majority of society's feelings about this particular act, and if whether the act is not already deemed unlawful within a statute or a law. So also the consensus view asserts that the law serves as a social control functioning element. So the members of society, they control what should be considered a law or not, and they act as a social control mechanism to make sure that those particular types of act are deemed criminal or non-criminal. The second view is called the conflict view. And what the conflict view basically says that laws are controlled by the 1%, the most powerful individuals in society, and they control what is deemed criminal or non-criminal. And it's basically the classic common thing that we always hear about, Karl Marx's idea of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. So the proletariat is the working class, the bourgeoisie is the middle class, and the bourgeoisie is always making sure that they keep themselves maintained in a powerful positions so that they can deem what's considered lawful or unlawful. And it's kind of the struggle between these two classes. And that, therefore, the criminal law shapes the bourgeoisie, or the majority has that power to determine what should be deemed as criminal laws and not criminal laws. So it kind of keeps the wealthy in power, and they keep themselves in power through identifying certain criminal sanctions that the proletariat will have to follow. So, for example, your book details that a certain type of crime that's kind of deemed uncriminalized, or it's white collar crime. So, for example, the Martha Stewart case, when she got convicted of money laundering and insider trading, and that's considered a white collar crime. It's not criminal. It's deemed criminalized by some, especially the people in power. They do it all the time. It's just whether or not they get caught or not. So Martha Stewart, for being convicted of insider trading and money laundering, she only served about 5 months in prison and was fined about $30,000. So that's an example of a white collar crime, and it reinforces this notion of the conflict view that the power rests in those 1%, the most wealthy and the most powerful in society, and they deem what's criminal or non-criminal. So the second concept that you guys said that you were a little bit confused on was the notion of reliability and validity. So when you're doing research within the field of criminal justice, you need to make sure that your research is valid and it's reliable. Particularly that your research is consistent and is reliable. So when we're talking about reliability, we're trying to determine whether certain data collection techniques would produce consistent results. So it's like the famous example is when you step on a scale. So when you step on a scale, when you go to the gym one day and you weigh 108 pounds, then you get on the next week and you weigh 114 pounds. And then you get on the weeks after that and you weigh 150 pounds. So we know that that would not be reliable because you're not getting consistent findings each time you step on that scale. So essentially, is if you if you do a study and you publish your results, because essentially that's what you're doing when you're doing research. You're publishing it and you're sending it out to the scientific community to review, to critique, whatever the case may be, to replicate as well. So let's say that if a researcher were to replicate your study on a separate occasion using the exact same sample, they should be able to produce similar results to what you had if they were using the same data collection technique, and if they're also doing it in a similar occasion or fashion that you did. So that's what we mean when something is reliable, if you can produce consistent findings each time you conduct the instrument that you're using. If the data is not reliable, if you don't get consistent findings. There are different types of reliability. I'm not going to go into that too much in depth right now, but just know that reliability is whether or not a data collection or technique produces consistent findings. And that's important because when you're testing something, you want to be able to replicate it no matter the research who's conducting it or no matter the occasion. You want to produce consistent results each time. So the next is validity. Validity, you also need to make sure that your measurement is reliable. So for instance, that means to the extent to which a measure measures what it's intended or says it's going to measure. I know that might not make sense, but essentially validity is when a measure measures what it's intended to measure. So I know that uses measure a lot. So essentially, what does that mean? So let's say, for example, you're doing you have a survey instrument or an item that is going to measure deviant behavior. That's what it's intended to measure. It's intended to measure deviant behavior. But in actuality, it measures IQ. Well, your measure isn't valid because it's not measuring the intent of what it was created to do. It was intended to measure deviant behavior, but it's actually measuring IQ. So therefore, we know that that measure would not be valid. It's not a valid measure. So again, when you're just looking at, and there's different types of measurement validity. You got construct validity, face validity. There's a whole type of different ways that you can ensure that your measurement or whatever data collection you're using is valid. But again, we're not going to get into that. But just know the difference between the two. You need both when conducting research. So that's like when you in your book it was saying for the Uniform Crime Report, the RCR, while it is a valuable tool and is the most commonly used tool in our field, it does have a lot of validity issues associated with that. And now that you have the definition of validity, you can be better able to understand what that means in regards to the UCR and other criminal surveys that we use within our field. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video and that kind of clarified things to you all. Have a great day.